we're going about success in the wrong way. We don't achieve our way to our highest potential. We die our way there. We unbecome our way to purpose and to our highest potential. Most of us are chasing after power, possession, and prestige, and we're doing it at the cost of our mental, spiritual, and emotional health. Which is why I had an experience where loads of success, but was very much struggling interpersonally within myself as it related to other people, coworkers, in my romantic relationships. And so it wasn't until I was able to determine what was the unconscious beliefs that was driving my conscious behavior, I was finally able to work through, break through, and heal those things so that I could then get to the next level, per se.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about the darker side of life and expansion. We have an author today who wrote the book, Let Love In. Jacob Kauffman is going to really talk to you about some of the things that we've got to be aware of in our unconscious or subconscious to be able to grow the way we want to. And he had to learn this through some of the work that he did. And he's written this book to really highlight the fact that these painful moments in our life are sometimes what shape who we are, but we have to learn to address them. We have to learn to understand them. And so Jacob and I talk about his book, Let Love In, which is on sale this week. If you want to get a copy of that, if you feel like there's something quite not right, it's on Amazon right now. And if you miss the special, I'm sure that it's very worth it to get it if it's not on sale. But I just wanted to remind you that support our authors, support the people that you feel like need a little bit of your support. And I just say that simply. My job here is to create the best experience for you as possible to help you grow and expand. And if you're leading a company and you're growing fast, you're not quite sure where to turn, then let's have a conversation. Let's dive into what's really holding you back, and let's get a better understanding of this. And when you do that, we'll be able to look at the growth opportunities in front of you and kind of what the next steps are and really help you prioritize that. All of that in our calls will help you really create clarity and confidence around who you are as a leader and how you're growing this company. Now, here's the interview with Jacob. Jacob, how are you?
Gene, I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
I am fantastic. We're going to have a great conversation about your book that's publishing this week. We're going to talk about Let Love In and what that means for leaders that are listening to the show. But give us a quick introduction to who you are.
Thanks, Gene. I appreciate you having me once again. But for those who don't know, my name is Jacob Kauffman. I'm a spiritual guide and life coach to 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, executives, CEOs, and I support them in living up to their true potential by deconstructing their egoic identity.
Well, that's similar to the work I do. I don't frame myself as a spiritual or life coach. I'm kind of curious. We'll talk about the book and we can go in any direction you want to go, but how did you get into this line of work?
Great question. So I started a company back in 2015 with a couple of other co-founders. That company is still in existence today. It has over 400 employees, is one of the fastest growing healthcare technology startups in the world. And I found myself sabotaging my success. We grew from basically nothing to over $4 million in annual revenue. So the abundance, the opportunity came fast and came hard, as they would say. And found myself struggling interpersonally with other members in the organization and started to notice that pattern. And what I would tell my clients today is that the pattern always reveals the problem. And so it forced me to take a look under the hood, if you will, and do some self-inquiry into what was the unconscious driving, motivating factor behind my behavior.
Perfect. I'm glad that you have gotten the support so that you can help others. But I'm just kind of curious, before you reached out for help, what was running through your mind? Because I know a lot of leaders are listening to this show, they're struggling with things. They don't want to reach out for help. They make these stories up about what's going on. Do you remember what's going on for you?
Well, what I will say first and foremost is that the new always demands the death of the familiar, which is where the ego hides so well. So whenever people struggle to reach out for support, you can be sure that the ego has some role in that right then and there. But for me, there was this primal frustration of knowing what I was capable of and where I was currently at, and the gap in between those things, and the internal resistance that was creating, the frustration that I mentioned, of knowing that there was a huge gap between where I was and where I was capable of being.
Now, Jacob's been talking about ego for a second, and I really wanted to remind you that a lot of time we don't realize that ego is what gets in the way. It's how we see ourselves, the fear we have with how others see us, and we're not willing to reach out and ask for help. I've had this problem before. I can remember distinctly, it's probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted to grow my business and I did not want to ask for help. I wanted to be able to do it myself. And I quickly learned that if I got help, I could navigate this not only faster, but I could have a much more elegant, simple way to navigate through this. And so if your ego is getting in your way for any reason, you got to ask yourself, is this my truth? Is this who I really am? My hope is you'll ask for help. Could be Jacob, could be me, could be someone else, but ask for help. Be willing to put your ego aside. Back to our interview with Jacob. We've all been through this. I know I did when I became a coach more than a decade ago. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but I knew that I could create some more impact in the world, but my business just made a lot of money and it wasn't really it wasn't living my purpose, but I couldn't do anything about it until, everything changed for me. When you had your first breakthrough, and I know you reached out for help, you got a coach or you got someone to actually help you through the period to understand what you were going through. What was that first breakthrough like for you?
It was really profound, to be honest with you, because what ultimately transpired was me acknowledging this experience from childhood when I was roughly 12 or 13 that was sexual abuse that I had simply repressed and repressed because I didn't know what to do with the pain. And this is incredibly common for children when they don't know what to do with or how to process a painful experience or a traumatic experience, anything that's too much, too soon, too fast. What do? We inevitably suppress it. Unfortunately, how we internalize it, we create stories about ourselves, beliefs about ourselves, other people in the world, a lot of which are not true. And so the minute I acknowledged that event for what it was, I started to connect the dots and see how the beliefs and the stories that I made up about myself as a result of that incident was showing up in my professional life.
I know I've experienced some things where I can't remember certain elements and names and things like that in periods that were really dark. Now there's dark periods I can remember those things like they were yesterday.
Sure.
Is this like a blind spot? Because in coaching, I know you're familiar with like the blind spots. We're not aware of what we don't know. But what's going on when you have a repressed memory?
Well, until we uncouple the emotions attached to that experience, we're going to continue to recycle that in the present moment, which means it's going to dictate how we show up, how we present ourselves, how we interact with other people, especially in the workplace. And so if we have a painful or traumatic experience that's happened in the past, and we still haven't done the work to uncouple those painful, lower vibrational emotions from that experience, we're just going to continue to recycle it in the present moment, and it's going to continue to hold us back. It's going to create internal resistance. It's just going to show up externally. So that's what was happening with me when it came to sabotaging my success and really struggling interpersonally in my approach to different relationships in the workplace.
We work with similar type people, right? Yep. Highly motivated, highly successful, ambitious. And I find that most of them have been through some really difficult times. And some people got support with that through people like me or you. How does these things that we're going to get into the book thing in just a second, but how does all this stuff really relate to these individuals that are really driven fast and doing big things out there that might be listening to our show today?
Well, oftentimes our greatest strength is simply an adaptation or an overcompensation to avoid dealing with pain. When we are very young children, the primary focus is on answering one question, and that is, who do I need to be? What do I need to do? And how do I need to be perceived in order to be loved, accepted, and successful? Loved and accepted by mom and dad, admired by my peers, and eventually, as we grow up and get older and graduate college and move on into the workforce, be successful. But if you think about it, the underlying resonance beneath that is of avoidance, because we're trying to avoid what? What's the opposite of being loved and accepted by mom and dad? It's to be rejected. What's the opposite of being admired by my peers? It's, to be cast out. What's the opposite of success? It's failure. So all of that is an unconscious response to avoid pain or the possibility of pain. And so this becomes the driving, motivating factor for so many people, especially men, in what we'll refer to as like the first half of life, where our primary stance is running away from something rather than towards something. In the second half of life, it's very much about the pursuit of purpose or being of highest service to something bigger than myself. But typically in the first half of life, it's the avoidance of something. This tees us up for performance, right? So we take on certain masks, we adopt certain personality traits, personality just deriving from the Latin word persona, which literally means mask, that is directly in response to pain that ultimately and over time, if left unaddressed, what do we end up experiencing? We end up experiencing loads of anxiety, stress, depression. We're just performing our way unconsciously around our pain. And that is why, as the saying goes, and you and I talked about it before we hopped on the podcast and clicked record, people don't have business problems. They just have personal problems that show up in their business.
Now, Jacob just said something really big, and I think it's helpful in many different ways. He said, you're either running away from something or you're running to something. Now, we've done this in our lives when we are trying to leave jobs or leave relationships that weren't right for us. We're running away from it. But I find the times when we're running to something is a much deeper experience. It doesn't have the pain. It has an energy vibe that is very positive. Now, I say that we use this in different ways. You want to make sure that you are running to something in your life. You have something that really striving for. For me, I want to create extraordinary leaders across the world that change the world. And I'm running to that. I'm not running away from it. It is my purpose. But you also want to make sure that you're tuning into this when you're hiring people for your team. A lot of people listening to this or they're growing people on their team. And the real key question here is, are they running from something? They don't like the job. They didn't like the experience. Or are they running to this? Do you have an experience that they're running to? The mission that you're on, are they running to that? My hope is you hire people that are running to the mission of your company and to the purpose and to what you stand for. Back to Jacob. I know that's definitely connects with me and the journey I've been on as I've leveled up over and over and over because it's taken that to be where I am today. Jacob, you've written this book and we haven't even mentioned the title yet. So let's go ahead and give a quick little introduction. Let Love In. Why did this book have to be written?
Because we're going about success in the wrong way. We don't achieve our way to our highest potential. We die our way there. We unbecome our way to purpose and to our highest potential. Most of us are chasing after power, possession, and prestige, and we're doing it at the cost of our mental, spiritual, and emotional health. Which is why I had an experience where loads of success, but was very much struggling interpersonally within myself as it related to other people, coworkers, in my romantic relationships. And so it wasn't until I was able to determine what was the unconscious beliefs that was driving my conscious behavior, I was finally able to work through, break through, and heal those things so that I could then get to the next level per se.
Well, I love the concept of the book. I have honored to have you on the show to be able to unpack a little bit of this. And also, this is coming out during launch week. And if anyone knows an author who's put their heart and soul into something that's meaningful and purpose driven, like this book is, I think it's a perfect example of this. You'd love for people to get it in their hands. You've made some special ways to do that. I may get the numbers wrong, but I'm going to try to do this. If it is a Kindle book, it's like 99 cents this week. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. You can get the ebook right now for 99 cents through the end of this Friday, April 28th.
So if you're listening to this, you only have like probably 24 hours, maybe a little bit more, depending on when you're listening it. But if you prefer a hard copy book, is that, you said half off?
50% off. Yep. In between now and the end of day Friday.
I'm impressed with my own memory in that. So,
Yeah. Nice job. Well done.
Jacob, let's dive a little bit deeper into this book.
Yeah.
Let love in. I know what love means to me, but I'd love for you to, because I know the journey that you go through when you write a book.
Yep.
What did you discover about yourself, about love, that you weren't connected to before writing this book?
We all have a threshold. We all have a threshold in terms of what we feel safe to receive, in terms of financial abundance, in terms of career opportunity, and in terms of love, connection, and intimacy. In order to increase our threshold to receive more of those things, more financial abundance, more career success, more love, connection, and intimacy, we have to determine what is blocking us from accessing a greater degree of abundance in those areas. So for me, it was realizing that this painful, arguably traumatic experience from the past, this sexual abuse that I experienced, had me create beliefs and stories as self-protective strategies that were unconscious, but that I was recycling later on in life, even 20 plus years later, that was preventing me from greater success in career, greater love, intimacy, and connection in relationship. Because once I exceeded my threshold, what happened? I felt fundamentally unsafe. And so I had to self-sabotage, which is literally self-protection. I had to self-protect. Self-sabotage gets this super bad rap. So I just had to self-protect from being hurt again. But all the while, this was unconscious. I didn't actually know what was going on. I just was bound to the effects, which I think is what led Carl Jung to say, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct our lives, and we'll call it fate.
So that's what this book does. It gives them a way to connect with that unconscious energy that's flowing through us.
Correct. Absolutely. Because our results always paint a perfect picture of what we believe about ourselves and other people, and what prevents us from accessing higher degrees of abundance in our lives, regardless of what that abundance is in, whether it's in money, opportunity, or in this case, in love. Because we all want to experience more of those things. We all want more love and financial abundance and opportunity. That's essentially universal. It's different for everyone in terms of how that plays out. Of course, it's inherently subjective in what it looks like, but we all want more of those things. But in order to achieve more of those things, first, we have to do some cleanup work, and we have to remove the inherent blockages and barriers that we've picked up along the way by way of our subconscious limiting beliefs.
This reminds me of all those times when you hear people that get divorced 2 or 3 or 4 times or whatever it may be. And like they keep repeating the same patterns because they're just not aware of it. They're recycling these stories, and until they fix themselves, they'll never have the life that they want. And I know that plays out probably in some of your work. I also know it's really hard to write a book because you have to cut out the good stuff.
Totally.
To leave just the core essence of these stories. What was the one thing that you cut out of this book that you feel like, okay, maybe that's another book down the road, or that's something that just doesn't fit here? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Oh man, that's a good question. I honestly haven't thought about that.
You
But
must
if I
not have labored over the editing like I did.
I did, I'll be honest with you, but I had a lot of help in that regard. And what I will say was choosing the ending, because most people get confused between coaching and mentorship. Coaching is, in my opinion, when someone comes to me to support them in achieving a particular outcome around a certain thing in a very specific timeline. Mentorship is very, very different, because the plight of, and I'll bring this full circle, I promise, the plight of being a growth-minded entrepreneurial person is that you're always what? You're always plateauing. You're always running into the inherent resistance at every new level. So for me, it was finding an ending, because this journey that we're talking about, this deconstruction, reconstruction journey, breakdown to breakthrough journey that we're talking about, it never ends. It's constantly unfolding and occurring. And so for me, it was choosing an ending, realizing that I'm continuing to go through this. I'm continuing to go through this growth and healing journey, this paradoxical, necessary suffering that involves taking, 4 steps backwards so that I can take 6, 8, 10 steps forward. It's continuing to happen, and it's never not going to happen until I die. So for me, it was choosing an ending, to be honest with you.
I know it's a hard question.
Yeah.
I'll give you the easy question, I hope. Your book is launching this week. We are talking with the author, Jacob Kauffman, about Let Love In. And you're probably getting some reader feedback. There's probably some people that are saying, you know what, this book, this part of the book is really powerful. What are you hearing most powerful element inside the book that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I'm tempted to read you a text that I got from a guy this morning who read it, who's a really successful real estate executive.
Sure.
But I'll read it because I don't want it to be my words, and I think that this will really tie a beautiful bow on this. But this is a gentleman who has achieved an incredible amount of success in his career. But what we oftentimes find is that success doesn't always translate into other areas of life. How many people do we know like that, where they're incredibly successful in one area, but they struggle in another? But he said, and I quote, "Great book. I just finished. It's amazing how things happen sometimes. Running into you guys, myself and my partner, Carrie, was great. But now 2 days later, on the other side of having finished Jake's book, I realize many things. I suppose the most important of which is that I'm not alone in my pain. As a man who is always focused on getting the most out of life, I've chased everything and have the scars to prove it. Somehow in becoming the person I thought I always wanted to be, I lost myself. Knowing this for the past 5 years has been daunting, to say the least. Continuing in the world, happily distraught with the truth, the past 5 years have been the greatest and worst of my life. I've become a father, ahead of my family. I've become incredibly successful in business and checked a ton of boxes off my list. But as for me personally, it's been like being on fire from the inside out. Every massive success on the outside being a reminder of how far I have to go internally. Using alcohol and food to numb that voice, and then waking up every day with a hangover and clothes that don't fit because I'm overweight. Being afraid to look in the mirror or at the scale. Adderall, THC, coffee, rich food, alcohol, and a big shelf where I keep everything I want to ignore. My path of awakening and becoming whole has pulled me to plant medicine, ceremony, quitting alcohol, regulating my diet, prayer, and the courage to be honest with myself. Yet in doing that, it's been hard to hold the life together. How to make the calls without drugs, how to get excited without rewarding myself, without beans and rice instead of steak. Won't life be boring without wine? All of these things that are killing me physically and emotionally have been lies, but lies I enjoyed, like a good movie. Yet when the movie is over, reality is actually worse. My challenge is to continue my healing and my life simultaneously, letting go of as much as I can without failing my family, which I have always done in many ways regardless. Thank you for writing this book, Jake, just the book and the resources within have given me a flash of light and a map to navigate the darkness within. Thank you."
That's a good way to end this. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of the show. We don't have that many authors on anymore because we focus on, the CEOs that we serve.
Sure.
But happy to have you on to share this element of let love in and what it means to you, what it means for others. So thank you for being here.
Gene, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a great interview. I really love having authors who are putting out meaningful work and sharing something that is really helpful for our audience. And that's the example today. The book, Let Love In by Jacob Kauffman, is something I can recommend, and I really would love for you to consider that. If there's anything I can help you with, whether it be leadership development or executive coaching, our team is ready to serve you. If you're curious about what that looks like, reach out to me. Gene@genehammett.com is my email, or you can schedule a call at genehammett.com. Love to talk to you. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, live with courage. We'll see you next time.